Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to my world, my podcast. Today, our special guest is Dr. Sam Bierstock. Great man. What makes him special is not that he was a doctor, he still is a doctor, but he was a musician, traveled all around the world. One of the beautiful things about him is he wrote a beautiful book. No, it's not a medical book, which I'm sure he could write. It's a book of characters that he took from his life and he created those characters. 200 beautiful pages. You will enjoy reading it. That much I can assure you. I prepare, like for every show, I prepare things I can talk about the people, just to give you an idea. Now, I have a bunch of pages like that. I'm just going to start reading the beginning. Dr. Bierstock, trained in internal medicine, is a board-certified eye surgeon, holds a BS degree in electrical engineering, and is nationally recognized authority on healthcare clinical information, etc., etc., etc. Now, I can talk for the next show, for the whole show, actually, not for the next hour, if not longer, about all his accomplishments. But I'm going to let him do it himself because he can do it better than me. Doctor, the show is yours. And if I have questions, I will interrupt you. So let's talk about you. Oh, let me mention one more thing. At the end of the show, where I need you to tell my audience where they can buy your book, of course. And I know you're going to talk about the books and some information if they want to get a hold of you. Doctor, the show is yours.
Amos, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I apologize for the long introductory material. You must have the version written by my mother.
Well, you earned
Probably
it.
3 or 4 pages. But I never really know how to put this rather crazy and eclectic career that I've had into a short sentence. But I'll try to be brief and then explain to people how this crazy career of mine fell into place and how I hope people will enjoy hearing about it. So basically, you're right. I started as an electrical engineer, went to medical school in the late 1960s, which really wasn't done in those days, and became an ophthalmic surgeon for 20 years. All of that time, I'd been a semi-professional musician, playing the blues harmonica and the guitar, but that was very much a hobby at that time. And I was making a little bit of a living from it, but not much. I left practice to become involved with electronic health records and had quite a long career in that arena. But during that time, which was in the 1990s, managed care came into place. And for those of your listeners who don't remember managed care, or I'm sure for those that do, everybody hated it. The doctors hated it because they weren't getting paid well. The insurance companies didn't want to pay for diagnostic tests. The patients hated it because they had to see certain doctors and only were allowed to be seen under certain circumstances. And the insurance companies did not want to spend any money. I got this crazy idea that I was going to form a band because I wanted to be playing more. And I called it Dr. Sam and the Managed Care Blues Band, and had all kinds of parody songs, which were humorous, but trying to make a point. So sample titles were things like, You Picked a Fine Time to Leave Me Blue Shield, or Sorry Man, but your bypass is considered cosmetic. It was all just parody. And it was intended or to be around this character who I call Dr. Sam, who decided he was going to manage the music business the same way the insurance companies manage medicine and make a fortune. So it was all this crazy idea where Dr. Sam didn't want to provide any service. Basically, he's a musician, but he said, you pay me a monthly premium. I'll decide what music you're going to hear, whether you like it or not. If you want to listen to somebody else, you can do it, but you pay for it yourself. I'm not going to rehearse. I'm not going to do anything that costs me money. And it was just this big farce about Dr. Sam. He didn't want to play. He had a band. He did not want to play. So because it was going to cost him money to play. So he wouldn't sing because he was a physician. So if he could get a non-physician to sing, that was better. And it was billed as the world's most reluctant band. This really resonated in the healthcare community, and I ended up on this crazy tour around the country with the band for the next, my God, almost 10 years. And the way it started was even more fortuitous because when it started, I had the idea for the band and some song titles. I had no recordings. And I had sent a little announcement to a magazine called Modern Healthcare, which published a small picture. Well, USA Today saw that and immediately called me and they said they want to do an article about me and my songs. They ran an article, which suddenly was picked up by CNN and by NPR and all the national media. And I'm getting thousands of calls for CDs. I didn't have any CDs. I didn't have any recorded songs at all. I literally was getting thousands of calls. I was telling people the CDs are a back order, ran into the studio, recorded a CD, and with great musicians, full-time pro musicians. And we put out a CD 2 months after the announcements. And that's when things went crazy. Then suddenly we were just touring the whole country with this crazy act. But the music was good and the lyrics were funny and the media was enjoying it. So that got Dr. Sam and the Managed Care Blues Band on something of a roll. Um, and just to give you an example of the kind of craziness, when I was on NPR with this wonderful interviewer named David Brancaccio, he kept saying, I understand you have your harmonica with you. Why don't you play us something? And I kept refusing. I said, I'm not playing it. I don't know how many of your listeners have paid their premiums. I'm not going to pay it. I'm not playing for people that haven't paid their premiums. Well, he got the parody right away, and we carried that for a good 15 minutes. And it was a wonderful interview that got a great response, mostly because of the reaction to managed care. So anyway, that was that. And that morphed into a couple of other arenas of parody. There was Dr. Sam and the Frivolous Action Blues Band, which was having fun with medical legal issues, etc. Um, then what happened, and just to show how this thing sort of grew, I was coming back from an event in California, 1 o'clock in the morning, through the West Palm Beach, Florida airport. And in those days, they still had a person collecting tolls. And it was 1 in the morning. I said to the guy, thank you. And I started to drive off. And this man said, it was an older man. He said, I took 2 bullets for this country and look what I'm doing. So I stopped and I thought what he said. He backed up and I said, sir, I've had a wonderful life in this country. Thank you for what you did. And he started to cry. I was so haunted by this that I went home. I couldn't sleep. In the morning, in about 20 minutes, I wrote down some lyrics to thank our World War II veterans. And I had struggled to put it to music. It took a few years. We finally did, and created a song called Before You Go, which I put on the internet for World War II veterans. I forgot about it. I mean, I didn't think much was going to happen. Well, within 2 months, that was being played 50,000 times a day. We stopped counting the number of times that Before You Go was being played somewhere around 2013. And by then, we thought it had been played about 25 million times. So it reached World War II veterans all over the world. Biggest honor of my life. I was able to tour the country and meet veterans who had been through the war in all kinds of capacities and reach them, able to thank them. So that was a tremendous honor. So that crazy idea I had at the beginning morphed into this wonderful period of time where I was able to thank all those veterans and began working with a 501c3 organization called Vets Helping Heroes, where we got support dogs for veterans with PTSD. So this crazy story is coming a little bit towards the end because what happened next was we got hit by the pestilence that we all know about and had us down for 3 years. And during that time, I was not traveling with the band. And I decided I had to come up with something else. And I went to a blues concert and I saw this Mississippi Delta 80-year-old musician playing a guitar made out of a gasoline can because he said he had no money when he was a kid. And I said, I need something like that for Dr. Sam. And I built a series of instruments, which I'll show you. Here's the first one. This is one of the first guitars that I built. And I don't know if you can see what that's made of, but that
It's
is
a bedpan.
a bedpan. And I have to tell you, it's not only a great looking guitar, I think, but a great sounding guitar. And then I couldn't stop myself. And I ended up making a whole series of bedpan instruments for an entire band. Here's a banjo, a bedpan banjo. And here's one that's a tambourine. And anyway, I made a whole series of them. And that became the Bed Pandemic Band, Dr. Sam and the Bed Pandemic Band.
Excuse me, Dr. Sam. Are you saying your music is crappy?
You might say that.
By the way, what's
You might say this is what we tell people. We warn them when we play.
What's hanging out behind you on the wall?
Oh, that's just another one of the guitars. This was one of the first ones I made. Again, but as I said, I made a total of 11 instruments, and they all function and play beautifully. And we've used them. I have used them in shows.
I know at the end of the show we're going to play all of them, and
we'll play. I think
music,
we're planning to play one of them as a parody, which was called. If your listeners know the song by Robert Palmer, "Might As Well Face It, You're Addicted to Love," and our song was called "Might As Well Facemask, We're Addicted to Gloves," and I think that hopefully people will enjoy it. So that was the Bed Pandemic Band, and now this all morphed into the book that I wrote because the book is about an elderly Vietnam vet with PTSD who's very down on his luck on life. He had been a musician when he was young, and he gets the idea to build these instruments and pull his band back after 50 years, and they go on a wild ride. So that it all stemmed out of me wondering, what am I going to do next with all these instruments? And then I took all these experiences from this crazy career of mine and put them into the book. I think the last thing I'll say, and then hopefully, I'll stop talking a little bit, but an important theme of the book is the concept of the hook. And this was another thing that motivated me for the story. For those that don't know it, in the music world, a hook is what gets you attention, what differentiates you. So the Beatles had their hair, that was their hook. Elvis had his gyrations, that was his hook. Gene Simmons had the tongue and the kiss and all that sort of thing. So the reason that I think we did so well with the Managed Care Blues Band, in addition to the fact that it was the right thing at the right time, that was the hook. The hook was that we had the managed care issues. There are great bands that have no hook and don't get attention. And in this story, it's a story about this band of men who were great musicians with no hook. But when they got together in their 70s and had all these instruments, they were pure hook. That was what got their attention. They took off.
Yeah, but when you read the book, then in the story it says that it was more than a hook once you're in it, and you guys took advantage of the talent. The hook only takes you there, but it does take talent to keep you there.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I was very lucky. I had the most fabulous group of musicians and great guys, and we enjoyed our travels around the country tremendously. So it's a wonderful experience. It's been a wonderful, wild ride that's touched on so many areas. It wasn't just all the political parody, but the amazing experience I had to meet and thank so many veterans who saved our way of life. If it wasn't for those veterans of World War II, we wouldn't have anything that we have today. Many of our minorities wouldn't even be here.
So, what's one of the things that I found in the book when I read it, you're giving credit to a lot of veterans. A lot of people don't even realize what people go through. And you could be a hero today, There are many unsung heroes, and you bring it out, especially the one, I'm not going to give the story away, where somebody puts notes on the wheelchair.
Yeah.
How people all of a sudden recognize people that I thought was just an old man sitting. So it's the way you brought out the story, the characters. I tell you one thing, I was thinking about it. There would be a great movie, by the way, because a lot of veterans, especially when they were in action, they can appreciate it. Number one. Number two, I personally would make a series out of it, movies. And I can recommend some nice people to you because, as you know, we're working on my movie right now, doing the screenplay for the Chubby Conqueror, and I would gladly recommend them to you. She's a wonderful woman, and she would be great for you, and
Well, thank
it
you
would
for
be a
that.
great show.
Thank you, Amos. Thank you for that. We are pitching it as a movie, which was my original intent, and I thank you for saying that. The instances you mentioned, by the way, was another experience in my life when my mother was in not a nursing home, a retirement home. She was almost 100 years of age. And I would see all of these older people in a wheelchair and just walk by them. And then when my sister began to speak with them, and we would find out that the lives that these people had, some of them had tremendously fascinating contributory lives. And, we don't stop and think about our older population sometimes. So that became a very important theme to me, to be sure that we respect and investigate and give credit to these people who, like all of us, age
Which you
to
really
become.
do, which
Yeah.
you really do in the book, especially when people are in a nursing home, many times they keep them high on drugs, like you mentioned, just to keep them quiet. They don't have to bother with them. So you also brought it out in the story. So I'm sure, mark my word for it, that will be a hit when it's going to be a movie or a series on television.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you giving me the chance to tell people about it. This is really nice. Thank you.
No, I'm going to promote this video.
Well, thank you so much.
You earned it.
I just would, I just wanted to mention in terms of my experiences with the veterans, I met men who had been through some things and some women that were just so unimaginable. I met with 17 of the remaining survivors of the sinking of the Indianapolis. And I don't know how many of your listeners know that story, but the Indianapolis delivered the atomic bomb to the island of Tinia before it dropped on Hiroshima. And on the way back, they were sunk by a Japanese sub. And about 1,300 men went into the water. The Navy did not know that they had been sunk. They weren't picked up for 5 or 6 days. Of the 1,300, only 300 survived. Almost all of the rest were eaten by sharks. It's a horrendous story. And I was able to meet 17 of those survivors and perform Before You Go for them, and the survivors of Pearl Harbor. And I met a man who had parachuted in the South Pacific onto an island that was inhabited by man-eating cannibals who captured him, and he managed to survive that. I mean, harrowing experiences. These people went through, and nobody knew what PTSD was in those days. So for years, people just said, well, they're shell-shocked. They weren't given, many of them lived their entire lives with tremendous trauma that was never approached. And I think really after Vietnam, we began to know what PTSD was needed to be recognized.
And
But
you pointed out in the book, by the way, nice,
yeah, you
the
did.
way, not pointing it out, but the way you present the characters at the time when it happens. That's what I like about it. Not
Yeah,
just
well,
saying he has
th
it.
those were pretty much characters that I knew in the course of my life who suffered greatly from
I
PTSD.
figured that.
Yeah.
The way you wrote
So,
about it, like there was
uh,
some real feeling in it. It's not just talking about characters getting shot or getting their legs blown off. You wrote about it like you would be living it and being a doctor, seeing all the different things. Yes, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much, Dr. Sam, for being on the show, and I'm
thank
looking
you, Amos.
forward to seeing you again.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
I really enjoyed it.